Can ugliness and art go together? Are they totally incompatible, or is it possible to create an interesting contrast? Perhaps this is not the first time you've come across a painting about ugliness. Actually, would the painting be considered ugly because it depicts something grotesque? I think this painting somehow manages to be disturbing and funny at the same time. What do you think? But this painting is making me intrigued. Why is an old lady dressed in this strange way? She looks so rich in spite of it. Who's she trying to seduce? Me? You? Someone else? And why does she look so corny? This painting, executed in oil on an oak panel, is called The Ugly Duchess by Belgian artist Quentin Massys. The Ugly Duchess is considered one of the most impressive Western paintings when it comes to portraying ugliness in a painting. Here, you see an elderly noblewoman who has a curiously strange and non-standard face. Her nose is too short and too high, her upper lip is exaggeratedly long, and her skin is wrinkled and pimply. Ew, there's also a hairy wart on her cheek, look there! There are folds of skin around her jaw and neck, and why do I get the impression that she doesn't have all her teeth? Don't you think so? The Duchess's face appears to be deformed. One of the theories explaining this deformity is that the woman probably has Paget disease, which affects the size and angles of the bones. As you can see, other elements of her face reinforce this theory. The unusually arched nostrils, exaggeratedly enlarged chin and collarbones, forward projecting ears, and protruding forehead. The Duchess rests one hand on the marble ledge in front of her, holding a flower suggestively between her fingers. Is she offering this flower to someone, or did she get it from some secret admirer? Interesting to note that the flower that the Duchess is holding is not in full bloom. What could it mean? Who knows the symbol of a love that is yet to be born, or of a love that will never bloom? The woman's physical appearance is somewhat awkward, but her robes are elegant and aristocratic, indicating her noble position as a duchess despite her ugliness. However, when this picture was painted around 1513, this type of clothing had been out of fashion for quite some time. Thus, even though she's dressed in fine and expensive clothes, the woman looks even more bizarre. The Duchess is an old woman acting seductively, offering her suitor a rosebud. This gesture seems to have a, let's say, passionate intention, as if she were making a tempting proposal to someone. Ooh la la, she's trying to make things hot.
But wait, I need to tell you something. I think that she's the reason why filters were invented, right? But what's really going on behind the scenes here? Take a wild guess and share your thoughts in the comments.
Another bizarre thing is how tight her clothes must be, as her broad, wrinkled breasts are excessively exposed and are almost jutting out of the dress. The hat on her head, called an escoffion, which was no longer used at the time, is shaped like two horns. It seems that this painting is showing a parody of a diabolical invitation to the temptations of the flesh. The Ugly Duchess is not in this alone. Literally, she has a counterpart. The painting The Portrait of an Old Man from 1517, which is now in the Musée Jacquemart André in Paris. Both paintings satirize and mock the false youthful vanity on part of old people who dress and behave exaggeratedly youthfully to mask or deny their true ages. This satire becomes most obvious in The Portrait of the Woman, which seems to have been inspired by Erasmus's In Place of Folly from 1511. In this literary work, elderly women are satirized in a misogynistic way. I see, not much of a respectful inspiration, huh? In any case, criticism of excessive youthful behavior seems to fall more on the female figure. The Ugly Duchess looks like a much more cartoonish painting than The Portrait of an Old Man, right? It is surprising to note Massys' sense of humor. It's present in both works separately, but is even more evident when putting them together, as this union defines established standards for double portraits. In both The Ugly Duchess and The Portrait of an Old Man, it's possible to note a somewhat fanciful adaptation of early 15th century Burgundian fashion. Even the old man reminds one of Philip the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, As for the woman, several identities have been attributed to her, but none are convincing enough. For the time being, she remains anonymous. It is even unknown whether there really was such a duchess or whether it is just another satire by Massys. After all, even when the noble figures were not great examples of beauty, they always give a touch-up to correct some imperfection. After all, the nobility could not be on the same level as everyone else, but to paint a noble figure openly in a grotesque way? Very unlikely to be real. You probably find the grotesque style of the Ugly Duchess a bit familiar, don't you? It turns out that Quentin Massys was a contemporary of another painter, none other than Leonardo da Vinci himself. Da Vinci also had a fascination with the grotesque style, and it's believed that he and Massys exchanged some sketches and ideas about the style. In fact, for a while, the Ugly Duchess was credited to Da Vinci. The Italian painter is the author of a sketch very similar to this painting, although there are differences in the proportions in the faces and necks of the two figures. It's possible that the two exchanged some sketches within this concept, and only Massys wanted to take the idea further and turn it into a painting. Because of this assumption, a technical analysis was carried out to test whether the Ugly Duchess could be a copy of a Da Vinci work or not. Infrared reflectograms revealed many scribbles underneath the painting of the Ugly Duchess, indicating that the painting is indeed original. The face was drawn with care, while the rest was constructed more freely and with more sketches. The face has undergone several changes, notably the eyes made twice, slightly moved up and to the right. The chin, neck, and right ear were also altered. They were made smaller. The shoulder was also redesigned, as well as the positions of the hands. Another factor that determined the painting's originality was the painting techniques, recognized as characteristic of Massys. For example, in many places in the paint was worked wet in wet, dragged and feathered, and the transitions of tones smoothed with energetic feathering. Some of the hair near the woman's right ear, as well as some of the embroidery on the right cuff of her dress, are rendered in sgraffito. Massys has scratched through a layer of still wet paint to reveal what lies beneath. Nicely executed. You can see that there are mottled areas of the Duchess's skin, which appear through the mottling of the basic pink with red and white dots, in strokes and spots. You can clearly see the skill that Massys has with a brush. Just look closely at the brooch on the lady's hat. There are about 5 shades of brown, orange, pink, and yellow in there. And there's also, mostly actually, lead yellow and in quite a lot of impasto. Since we're talking about the escoffion, look how curious. The two sides of the escoffion, the diabolical horns, are different. On the right side, the stripes were made by removing the red, white, and blue to reveal the black layer underneath. On the left side, it's the other way around. The black paint is what appears on top. There are 2 possible answers for this. The sides were made by different assistants, or Massys simply wanted to execute it this way. By now, it should be clear to you that ugliness is a very central theme in this painting. Now, if you take into account the time in which art was situated in 1513, the concept portrayed by Massys becomes even more interesting. In 1513, the artistic period at that time was the Renaissance. One of the messages this movement carried was rejuvenation, based on the legacy left by classical antiquity. Harmony and precision were great characteristics that Renaissance artists appreciated, but many of them also delighted in humor. Massys was one of these artists, and this trend is something that the Ugly Duchess manages to illustrate with excellence. Well, besides Da Vinci, doesn't the Duchess remind you of anyone else? Yeah, it seems her style is so iconic in its own way that it inspired the drawing of a book character. Some researchers believe that illustrator and cartoonist John Tenniel was inspired by the Ugly Duchess to create the illustration of the Duchess character from Alice in Wonderland, a book by Lewis Carroll. Wow, don't they really look alike? They could be sisters. Well, if it wasn't inspired, it's an uncanny coincidence. Now we'll move forward in time. After it was completed 400-something years later, the Ugly Duchess appeared at an auction in New York and gained a relevant reputation. A few years later, around 1940, a woman named Jenny Louisa Roberta Blaker donated the painting to the National Gallery, where it will be put on display in 2023 along with its other half, the portrait of an old man. What a romantic encounter. Finally, besides all the satire and amazing techniques, the Ugly Duchess also opens up a lot of reflection. This is a very useful reflection for today's times of how the female standard of beauty works and how it can affect older women in society. Still a very pertinent topic, right? So, did you enjoy finding out more about the Ugly Duchess? Did you learn some flirting tactics perhaps? Or inspiration for the outfit you'll be wearing next time you go out? I hope none of those things. If you like this video and want to discover more paintings like this, make sure to leave your like here, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notifications for upcoming videos. See you soon!